So you're right. So it's really just that more holistic approach to things. And, education and grades are just one part of it. But of course, like you said, it's more the effort and the attitude that they put towards it rather than the final results itself.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a podcast channel where we share tips and resources with Catholic parents. Presented through the lens of the theology of the body, we will see how we can be gifts to our children in ways that will help them find true happiness and flourish in accordance with God's wonderful plan for each and every one of them. My name is John Hui and I'm your host for this series. Today we've got a very important and pertinent topic to discuss, and that is helping our children manage examination stress. Maybe we have to help ourselves too. Yeah, but to do that, we have with us Dr. Penny Tok, who is a psychologist in private practice and who has much experience in dealing with these issues. And welcome to the show, Penny.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for you making the time despite your very busy schedule, Yeah. So to start off, could you share with our listeners a little bit about yourself, your family, and your work?
So thanks. I moved back to Singapore in 2013. So 10 years now. Goodness, time flies. 10 years back in Singapore because my husband and I wanted to start a family and we wanted to be with family rather than being in a foreign country with no one. So I came back, decided to set up a private practice with the main reason of being able to have that flexibility of time so that we could devote, more of my time and resources towards the family rather than just for work. So I'm thankful I have that opportunity. So I came back to work with psychology, and I really like working with children. But I work mainly now with children all the way from, the youngest one I had was 11 months that came in, and now all the way more towards working with adults and families as well. So a lot of times people come to us for different reasons. Some come for, whether they're a bit depressed, anxious. I work with those with disabilities as well as, sometimes parents just need a little bit of outside professional support and advice about things that, at home that may need some kind of just a different view on things and some guidance on. Yeah, so I have 2 boys now. And so it's sometimes I also feel like, sometimes parents have said to me, oh, your children must be so well behaved. They must be so good. I'm like, no, not at all. Not at all. Children are, they are who they are. I can do whatever I can and I try my best, but no, they are individuals. And so I like to share with other parents my parenting journey and the mistakes I make along the way as well.
Well, we'll have to high five that. Yeah, we're in the same boat. I always share with people that we are not sharing this podcast because we are great parents, but because we also like to share all the mistakes that we have made and the lessons we learn along the way. And we hope that they won't make the same big mistakes, especially that we make.
Yes. It's about sharing experiences as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And yes, and looking like you've got lots of experience in managing these areas of anxiety, stress, even depression in individuals and families, including young clients, I guess. So as a start, since we are discussing this topic of helping our children manage examination stress, would you like to start with sharing with us what are the common causes of examination stress in children and teens?
Yeah, I think it's especially so, in Singapore with the big climate. So we know that there are quite a number of changes along the way with regard to removing streaming, changing the PSLE exam criteria. But I think that the pressure is still very much on, and it might take quite a while before, I think the mindset starts to change about things with regard to education. But typically we do see a lot of parents as well. They get really stressed during exam times. And we know in terms of mental health, a lot of times it's just before exams and when the results are coming out. And that's where a number of children actually go into quite high states of anxiety, right? So before the exams, during the exams, and after the exams, it's calm for a bit. And then when the results are coming out, we see that spike as well. So typically then, we get busy here as well, because then we know, okay, PSLE is coming, O levels are coming, and we kind of, we've been around a while enough to know that there's a bit of a trend coming. So that's always a bit of a concern.
You must be very relaxed during the school holidays.
Yes. I mean, but some would then want to do extra to prepare. So we'll see.
Oh, that sounds like more stress. Well, I suppose, like you mentioned, parents also get stressed, right? So sometimes when we get stressed, we pass on the stress to our children, right?
Yes.
And sometimes it might make things even worse for the children who are facing stress from both the school and then now from home, and trying to fulfill the expectations of the parents even. So what can we as parents do to help our children in this area, to help them cope and manage examination stress?
Yeah, I think because a lot of the stress from the children come from, fear of disappointment, fear of disappointing themselves, fear of disappointing their parents, and of course, fear of reprimand, fear of punishment. Because typically it tends to, I think studying for exams in particular is not terribly exciting. And so to understand that not every child is going to be so motivated and so internally motivated to do well. So then what I think we tend to do as parents sometimes is to either dangle carrots, either threats or rewards, which then become very external, right? So then, of course, if I don't do well, I'm guilty of it as well. My son has things here today and he's like, Mommy, if I do well, can I get Pokemon cards? And I was just joking. I'm like, okay, you get all correct. And he's like, how about two wrong? Can I still get Pokemon cards? And so we were laughing. I said, no, you know what? No matter what you get, I think you deserve it because we've been practicing, you've been doing well, you've tried, so I think that's more important. Right. So I think that one is something that we need to be a bit more mindful of. If everything is going to be rewards and punishment based, then from the child's point of view as well, after a while, it's like, well, what am I working for? And we don't want that to become, a reflection of themselves, like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm not good. And I think the other part is that even for myself, right, sometimes when I see my children and I'm like, oh, why are you not working as hard? But then I have this very nice memory, which is obviously very fake, because I think my mom would disagree with me, of me being a very conscientious student. I would do my work, and I'm sure if I talk to my mom, she'll be like, no, I don't think so. So we have this view when we think back about ourselves and our childhood, sometimes we forget how difficult we were and how difficult studying was, or exam times. So I think as parents, sometimes we need to just pause and think, were we really the best students ourselves when we were younger? And also just be mindful. Like I find as well, like in terms of helping my child, sometimes some days I actually clear my schedule so that I would do Chinese homework with my son, because that's always the hot topic, right? The hottest, the most difficult subject. But I also know that if I go in and I'm stressed, and the slightest fidget or the slightest time he starts to, get distracted, I get upset. However, when I go in and I remind myself, he's going to struggle, I'm going to get frustrated, and just be mindful, that it's just, this is going to happen, and prepare myself for it. I find that, from a parenting point of view, it really helps. It really helps because expectations are laid. We know that. So I think a lot of, to answer your question, I think in terms of self-reflection first, right? Self-reflection first, and then, scaffold the support for them as well. So rather than, just pushing, but scaffolding in terms of the practical side of things. If studying and exams are difficult, what can we do to help? And also the emotional, psychological side. A lot of praise. Fears tends to make people work faster, but it also has, more detrimental long-term effects, and the motivation is just different. So I think from a parenting point of view, that would be something I'd like to suggest parents kind of think about a bit more.
So true. You actually just brought me back to my primary school days, and what a kid I was, right? And I remember having my times of having my own fun and not doing whatever I had to do. And obviously, there were times when my grades dropped a lot. And I remember there was once when I thought my parents were going to give me a talking to or a hiding. And my mom surprised me. She actually just said to me this one sentence. It doesn't matter to me what your grades are, what your results are. It just matters to me whether you tried your best or not. And that I remember I was in primary 4 at the time. It's still stuck in my brain up to now. Of course, at this age, I have better long-term memory. But I must say that even from that time, the memory of that incident really etched in my mind. And it sort of like helped a lot in my understanding of what my attitude towards examination should be. And I tried to do that with my kids. not very successfully, I must admit, but I tried. And like you said, sometimes we just get a little bit stressed ourselves, and we find ourselves getting a little bit irritable and things like that, and trying to help them with the tests and exams and PSLE and things like that, right? So I know what you have been going through and what you're going through. Yeah,
because I know that in particular with my older one, if I start to get a bit short with him, right, and then he senses it, and then he gets upset, and then the learning will not go anywhere, even if I'm trying to support. And in the end, everyone's unhappy. So quite often I will have to either remove myself and say, okay, I need a break, I'll come back. But it is effortful, but I do still remind myself that I'm the adult in this situation after all. I'm talking about younger children, but even for those that are slightly older, right? We have to be mindful that they are still children. Even a teenager is still a child, it's still not an adult. So, and of course the ways to motivate them would be different. Yeah.
Yep, true. In that case, what kind of attitude towards studies and exams do you think that we as parents should inculcate in our children? Maybe inculcate in ourselves first, and then we pass on to our children, Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the key thing, because unfortunately, in our setting, so much is focused on grades. Right? And I think, when we look at children and a person and their self-worth, their self-identity. So as a child, obviously, my main identity is as a child, in my family, but also my education and the scores and the grades. So I think we need to be conscious to move away from that and focus on the holistic side of things. So, like you said, what are exams? What are exams for? What's education for in the first place? What kind of attitude? So learning and education is a platform, right? It's a platform that opens up the world. That's what I tend to tell, I like to tell my children. It opens up viewpoints. You hear different viewpoints. You're intelligent enough to take on new ideas, make your own wise decisions about things. Right? And then you've got options. So that's usually, my attitude towards education, towards learning. And I think that could be something that, I'm sure there are other things which I can learn from others as well. But that's the message that I've been sending to the kids and families I work with, and also my own children.
Oh, that's great. It looks like it's a very holistic kind of education that you seem to be proposing right now, in the sense that we want them to learn not just to get better grades, although grades will be a bonus, but really to learn to be able to be more knowledgeable, and more importantly, to be wiser, and also to be better individuals, right? And not just people who are just exam smart and just get the grades that you want. And then after that, you find that someone with a big head but a small heart going out into society and then making things worse perhaps in society, if that's the case, possibly. I don't know, So I think it seems to me that that's what you're proposing.
Yes. And also, I like to remind people I work with as well. It's like everyone's got different roles in society. So really good grades will, yes, that opens up different roles, but it doesn't diminish the importance or the value that other people play in our lives as well. So I talk about, someone might be really good in sports, right? And that's their thing, and that's good for them. But, grades might be somebody else's thing. So you're right. So it's really just that more holistic approach to things. And, education and grades are just one part of it. But of course, like you said, it's more the effort and the attitude that they put towards it rather than the final results itself.
Yeah, I think in our local context, it does seem rather challenging for parents to try to get a mindset whereby, if my kids don't do well in the schoolwork and their grades, it's okay. They are very good in this other activity or in this other sport, and let's get them to develop in that area. Unlike some other countries whereby perhaps they have very professionally organized sports bodies and so on, which help the children develop well and become professional players in their own fields, right? But in Singapore, in our local context, it seems that is not as available, we might say, and it seems as though parents therefore feel that they don't have very much option if they want the children to succeed, in inverted commas.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, because I think in Singapore we do have, I think one is just the nature of the size, of Singapore and everything else. We do seem to have a few more limited options. So in other countries where, for example, tradespeople are highly valued and skills, not just your academic grades, but like you said, sports and everything else has a bit, there are options. And I know that someone has said to me before, it's like, oh, this talk about holistic views, grades are not the only thing. It's sometimes it's people who come from well-to-do families that can afford to have such views, right? So those that don't have as much, they feel like that's really one of the main areas or main ways that they can move and improve their financials or anything similar. So I do agree that it can come across as quite difficult, but I think that in anyone, the motivations are the way we motivate a child to help them see the value of education will have a very long-term effect. And if I'm constantly going, if you do this, you'll get this job, you'll earn this much money in the future, it really just takes away the value and the love for learning, and it will only have limited success. I've got adults that come in and say, oh, my parents were really strict with me. Yes, I'm a successful such and such now, but I hated learning. I'm frustrated. I don't even like my job. And so, I think it will balance out in the end. So I think, I'm not so idealistic and going, oh, yes, we should all, just sit around and be happy all day and not, worry too much about the future. But I think it will just still need a bit more of a balanced approach, because mental health is very important. And we don't want to get the children or the parents or the families in a situation where I have to undo the damage that's been done. So if we just take a more measured approach, I think that would be probably the wisest.
Yeah, true. And it actually brings to mind also this advantage that we Catholic parents have, right? Which is that God will take care of them. He's got a plan for them. He knows what's best for them. We just let them try their best and let him do the rest. Yeah, I know it's easier said than done, right? Yeah. For us parents here. But I think that this is one of the things that my wife and I really try to remind each other when things don't go the way we thought they would, or the way we had planned or so, or we had hoped, really. But it's fine. In the end, things do work out for the better. And sometimes children do take time to flourish. And to really bloom. Some are late bloomers, and they might do that later in life rather than earlier on. Yeah, and like you said, life is marathon. It's not just a sprint. We can actually just some things can work for a short period of time, but beyond that, if the motivation is not internalized, it's going to be very difficult to maintain the marathon.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, and like you said, some of the practicalities of life get in the way, obviously, right? But if we just, like you said, just take time, reflect on it, obviously say a bit of a prayer, just take a bit of, speak to other people in similar situations, get a bit of, and then see if that helps. I think that would be one thing they can consider.
Yeah, that's very good, wise words. Yeah. And since we're on this topic, right, of parents promoting culture of learning and being more so-called tolerant of grades and focusing more in terms of a holistic approach to education of the person and not just of the grades. How can we, as parents, promote the culture where our children can have a love for learning, and then they can be really more internally motivated to do the best that they can without having to be unduly stressed by exam grades,
Yeah. I think sometimes it's a few factors, right? So one of the things is that, I've got some families that will say, oh, my child needs to read more. They need to read more widely. They don't read. And then when we talk about the habits of the family doesn't read. So then the child would say, but my parents are always on their phone. They're doing this. They're not reading. Or, so that sometimes, I think modeling some of the behaviors. I mean, and I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes I just want my children to leave me alone, go on my phone, just mindlessly scroll through things. And then I have to consciously remind myself, oh, I think I should, play a game with them or read a book. And then, it's so, I'm definitely guilty of all these other things, but I think modeling would be really good. Engaging them in the discovery, right? Engaging them in discussions, engaging them with the discovery, encouraging conversations. So it's like, oh, when you read about this, so, my son has been going on about, Mommy, my teacher says we need to grow typsin for science class. And so, we got down, and so spending a bit of time, it is effortful, and often it's boring stuff for me. It's like, I've grown enough green beans in primary school, and it's not terribly exciting for me, but then I have to remind myself why I'm doing it. And it's the joint, the learning and experience. So I think that would be one thing, and just encouraging knowledge, right? Just the love for knowledge. And it could be for anything that the parent's interested in, anything the child's interested in. Doesn't necessarily have to be books and maths or science school type things. So that would be, I think, one of the key things that, we could all try a bit more.
Yeah, quite right. So it seems like a monkey see, monkey do.
Yes.
I think that's a very, very wise way of approaching things. When we come to want to educate our children, right? Educate our children, inform them in the way that really is best for their overall growth as persons.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's really scary, right? As a parent, when you sometimes hear, like for me, when sometimes I hear the way my son answers me and my husband will be like, that sounds like you. That's like how you speak. Or he'll say, my son would say something. I'm like, you got that from daddy. That one's the daddy thing you've picked up. So, and it is sometimes it's quite scary. It's like, oh my gosh, is that how I sound? I need to be more mindful of myself.
Sometimes, right, as parents, we do fall into that, when our kid misbehaves, it says, you look, your son, or your daughter. And when our kid does well, it says, my son, my daughter did this. So my wife and I have to consciously always make the effort to say our child, our daughter. So I think, it's so good to actually get the kids to have a wonder about life, have a wonder about nature, have a wonder about even knowledge itself, to wonder about things around them, and to have the kind of healthy curiosity to understand what things are, why they're happening, and why do we think this way, why do we say that way, why do we behave this way, and so on and so forth, so that they can actually over time develop a greater understanding and appreciation of not just maths and science, like you said, but also culture and literature and things like that, right? And history and so on. Yeah. Yes. And of course, in our case, the understanding of who God is and how God is so relevant in our lives. And he's the one who actually really gives us the grace to flourish the way we can and we should.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's been quite a wonderful time having this chat with you. And I'm sure many of the parents would have appreciated what you have shared with us. Before we end, Penny, do you have any last words of advice like to share with the Catholic parents who are listening into this podcast?
Yeah, I was thinking about it because I wasn't aware, but I found out after the fact that my old school actually had their anniversary event, and just watching, videos that my friends have posted online. And initially I realized they were singing the school song, and I was like, oh, I don't remember the song at all. But after a while, it all, after a few lines at the whole song, I mean, I sang it for 10 years. Right. So it's hard to forget. But then, but obviously it's been out of my mind, but that kind of brought me back the school motto as well. Via veritas vita, right? The way, the truth, and the life. So I think, we're often so caught up with getting the right snacks, getting them on time for classes, getting homework done, meeting all these just daily requirements, even sports classes. I think we sometimes spend a bit too much time worrying about those and forgetting the basics. And I thought, thinking back and reflecting upon the via veritas vita, the way, the truth, and the life, which, like I said, for 10 years, that was my school motto. And just remembering and reflecting in terms of what's the purpose in terms of life, right? To seek truth, and the way we live it, I think that's still way more important. And that could be something that, when in doubt, if some parents may not be from St. Anthony's and that family, but, I'm sure you would have your own motto, or even the church you go to, or, in your, in your church and in your family, something that comes back to the core beliefs of, what you and your family stand for and what God stands for in our lives.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I think you really summarized it very well. The way, the truth, and the life. And once we have the way, the truth, and the life with us, Jesus himself, we would actually really have the answer to everything. And there's really nothing to be too worried about, because whatever it is, we know that in the long term, things will be fine, and he'll be there with us. That's right. Yes. Thanks so much, Penny. All right. So, well, there we have it, listeners. Thank you very much, dear parents, for being part of this journey. We also would like to thank Dr. Penny Tok, psychologist in private practice, who has shared so much of her experience, even her parenting experience, and her expertise and insights into this area. So I'm sure many of us have benefited from this talk and from the way she has shared with us regarding how we can manage exam stress ourselves and how we can help our children manage exam stress. So with that, we thank you once again, and take care, and God bless you and your family always. Bye-bye.
Bye.